Fantastic Pixel Castle and Frog Pants Studios presents Word on the Street with Greg Street and Scott Johnson.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to the 20th episode of Word on the Street with me, Scott Johnson, and FPC studio head Greg Street. Greg, welcome back.
Hey, nice to see you.
Good to see you, man. Been a pretty weird 30 to 60 days, though, on your end. I've sort of been here on the sidelines, feeling it's a weird position I'm in because I feel part of your team in a weird way.
Yeah,
you and I have been friends forever, but there's something also about everybody we've had on and everybody I've talked to. I feel kind of close to the team for I don't know what reason, but I think that says good things about the culture of FPC and the people you have around you. So I feel like in proxy, I have had to go through a little bit of a, the stages of grief, a little bit about what's potentially happening. I thought maybe we'd take a second and before we introduce our guests, maybe have you give them the elevator idea, short version of where we're at. What is the status of things at FPC and with Ghost?
Yeah, so it's a weird time in the game industry right now, and lots of studios and publishers are making headlines by canceling things or shutting things down, and unfortunately, we are in that hallowed list of we are no longer going to be working with NetEase. We have spent several months looking for a potential new publisher or investors. Those are really hard to find in this market, particularly for a AAA game of the scale of what we want to do. So we are the FPC as a studio will cease to exist after this week. That doesn't automatically mean the end because we're still having some of these conversations, and it's possible that if funding comes through, we'll still have enough of the team together that we could go forward. But I think you and I talked about this will probably be the last word on the street we do. Hopefully we'll come back with good news down the road, but if not, it's 20 and done.
Yeah. I mean, we didn't mean for it to be a nice even number like this, but I would rather it go much longer, but it sounds like today might be it. And if it is it, this has been a really fun experience. Like I feel like if other small studios saw what you were trying to do with this, and it's really important for people to understand this. When Greg and I first talked, it wasn't about, hey, I'm Scott and we should do another show. What do you think, Greg? It was more like, I'm making a game and I want to show how we're making it in the most transparent way possible. Kind of unheard of. Nobody else really is doing this very often. Maybe small 1, 2, 3 man teams are doing something similar with the schedule they have. But a studio with this much talent doing this kind of project, this is just kind of an unheard of way of doing it. And so honestly, it's been a real honor to be a part of what I think is a bit of a pioneering moment in game development. And that being said, we're going to talk about where things are, where things might be headed, how you guys are all doing and feeling, that sort of thing. But first, let's introduce our guests. They're both returning. It's good to have them both back. It's John and Kristina. Welcome back, you two.
Hi. Thanks.
Good to have you both back here. Obviously, everything we talk about today not only applies to the game, but applies to you guys and your lives and your careers in this industry and all that sort of stuff. Maybe we start things, Greg, with talking about what this means for Ghost, like the actual code base, the alpha, pre-alpha stuff you have on servers that are all sitting there that have been carefully crafted by your team. What now? Do you retain rights to that stuff? Will it see the light of day in your opinion?
We are a NetEase first-party studio, so all of that content belongs to NetEase. They're the ones who paid for it all, who paid our salaries, who they own all of that. That said, if we did find a new home, an investor or publisher, they would be willing to hand that over. But in the absence of that, it'll get locked away in a vault and maybe someday see the light of day. But you can kind of see where that story's going.
I want to kind of ask this of everybody. I think maybe this next question will start with John. this industry, the gaming industry, which is a really complex, multifaceted business now. You have everything from the perspective of small indie developers and little stuff happening on the fringes that's fun and innovative, and they now have platforms for those things to get exposure, Steam and whatnot. And then you have all the way up to what people consider AAA, the big stuff from Sony and Microsoft, and those kinds of games, your $70 game era stuff. And then you have this big chunk in the middle where things can get a little bit nebulous. I'm curious, as a veteran in the MMO space, your take on that part, that end of it. Like, is there room for MMOs to be able to say, yes, we're doing a thing, yes, funding's in place, yes, we can move forward, and have the confidence that all of those things will stay consistent through the end? Do you know what I mean? Like, can they go the distance? So I guess you're overall on that.
Sure. Yeah, I'm going to sound like a little bit of a raving lunatic on this, but like, one of the things that's really frustrating to me, right, from the position that we're in, is we know and can prove how much hunger and interest there is from players for these games. And you can see it. You don't need to have my job to understand that, right? Like, every single time that a promising new AAA MMO has launched in the last 5 years, you can look at the Steam charts, you can look at any of the business results. Like, those games have done incredibly well at launch. Not all of them have had a ton of staying power, which is a whole separate issue, but the audience hunger is just really, really obvious. And I say that as a player myself. Like, so once you start there and you say, there is a market for this, then you kind of get to the other side of the equation, which is MMOs are really expensive to make. And this was always a really ambitious project. I've seen a whole bunch of, given the situation we're in now, a lot of people, I think, reasonably asking, like, why would you try to make a new AAA MMO in the first place? Like, shouldn't you have picked something right? Like, shouldn't you have picked something easier? Shouldn't you have? And I think that's all totally fair. But like, the reason why NetEase hired Greg and we put this team together was because that was what they had wanted to do. They wanted to make a big ambitious MMO, and they saw that opportunity. And obviously some of that, probably changed over the last couple of years. But my belief and hope is, given the audience interest there and the strength of all of these recent launches, like, there should be space for ambitious projects here. But our experience the last couple of months going out and talking to potential investors and publishers, like, people who would have written checks that large have all been burned in some way over the last year or two with big, expensive live service bets that didn't work, or other projects that they pursued that didn't work. And we're obviously not the only studio in the headlines over the last couple of months of layoffs and closures, and we're just seeing a whole bunch of other stuff going on in the industry that I think makes all this really hard right now.
Yeah. I mean, is there even a conceivable path forward where MMOs, they by their nature, it just feels like they can't be the next Stardew Valley where one guy in his basement comes up with the next hot MMO. They are, by their nature, massive projects with all hands on deck and many people involved. And you can go with the minimum, I suppose, but that's still in the 20s to 30s to 40 people or something, to do it in some reasonable amount of time, which is also important for those who are shoveling money toward it. That, from an MMO player's perspective, myself, I love these games, but I can also kind of I feel like I'm seeing the writing on the wall. I think the industry sees MMOs almost like live service bets that aren't going to happen, even though I think chasing after, trying to be the next Fortnite and trying to have a competitive MMO, I feel like those are two totally different efforts, but I think they're getting lumped. And that may just be my perception of things. I don't know if anyone can counter that for me, but is that how the money side of this sees MMOs? Is just these super risky, everybody's trying to do it, nobody can pull it off, only two big ones can exist kind of attitude out there?
I mean, the way I think about it is publishers have a love-hate relationship with live service games, of which both, Fortnite and MMOs you could put in that bucket. On the one hand, done well, they will continue to generate revenue forever, or for at least, decades or more. But there is a lot of of investment up front, and you're committing, once you make one of those games, you're committing to like regular updates. You can't make one of those games and say, okay, we learned a lot, now we'll go work on the sequel, because the whole promise you're making to players is you're going to invest in this game and we're going to keep supporting it. So it's hard, like you said, it's hard to make these on the cheap. Just building client server architecture or whatever, takes a lot of humans. These are very hard to be indie games by definition.
Yeah. I mean, is there, Kristina, I'd love to get your take on this. If there was do you think there's a vision forward that the tools will eventually get to a place where maybe that can be better democratized and less of a commitment from the massive money end of the business? Do you think that can happen just more organically down the road, and that you guys are just ahead of your time a little bit?
Yeah, I think so the thing that needs to happen is you need to lower the risk of the MMO in order for companies to be willing to invest in them, right? And so some of the way you lower the risk is by innovating on how you make content more cheaply. And that was kind of our idea of Blue Zones, like, oh, we can give you replayable experiences. They can extend kind of the lifetime of the MMO without us needing to hire 1,000 people, right?
Yeah.
But even then, that was innovation. I think we have to kind of figure out how to do that really well. And 100% certainty is really what investors and big companies are looking for. And I think the hard part of games is that's not games. Games are a creative enterprise, and you will never delete all of the risk from a game. So what many companies are looking for, I think, is like, well, how can we make the risk as minimal as possible, which means a smaller and smaller budget. So I think the other thing that will happen is how can you develop MMOs iteratively? Because that also brings down the risk. If you can prove that a small little loop of an MMO works, okay, now add some more content to it, add some more money to it. But that's also kind of an innovation in the MMO industry. And you have seen titles work that way. Just it's not the standard way we make MMOs right now.
Yeah, you see some game, I cannot remember the name of this game, but it's from the people that did the Darksider series. Anyway, it was supposed to be an MMO, and then they shifted.
Oh, Airship. Yeah, Airship Syndicate.
Yeah, and they shifted gears like right toward release, and decided to make it a kind of a looter shooter single player thing. It was a co-op capable, but it was no longer an MMO with quest hubs and the things we think of in an MMO, big open world and that sort of thing. And it was an interesting pivot. I don't know the details of that, but I came away from seeing how that went with that game, seeing it as kind of a cautionary tale of they probably got into some pinch toward the end, couldn't convince investors that the hit was there or something. And so they had to sort of salvage what they had. What I think a lot of us looking forward to Ghost had sort of hoped was that was maybe possible here. Not necessarily that you were right around the corner ready to have a single player game or a smaller co-op experience ready, but that you could have taken some of these great ideas, the Blue Zone stuff, and then said, well, all right, we're going to do this smaller thing. So I guess I would ask you, Greg, is one of the things on the possible whiteboard is that, maybe the studio does a smaller game and it's more, I don't know, the scale, the scope is smaller, but we take some of our good ideas and move forward. Like, kind of where's your head with that?
Yeah, we have been pursuing that. It was pretty, let's just talk about game budgets for a quick second here.
Sure.
If you're making a video game, almost all of your cost is salaries of your people. And we know it takes a lot of people to make a game. And engineers are not cheap. You can find these situations where like 3 people went together and didn't take a salary for a few years and made a game. And that happens. But when you're talking about people who've been in the industry for a while, let's just say a small game made by like 10, 15, 20 developers might have a budget of 30, 40, 50 million. And then when you're talking about a live service game, you're up there into the, this was not our budget, but there's certainly games out there with $300 million of upfront investment.
Right.
And there was just no way we were going to get that. Like, you can't go to a venture capital and say, can you write me a check for $300 million? Like, some of the people that were reaching out were offering like $100,000, which is appreciated that they would reach out, but that doesn't get you very far.
Yeah.
So what we did pretty quickly is tried to pivot our core thesis to something much more like a a fantasy Helldivers, really around the core loop of go out, have a quick 40 to 60 minute adventure with your friends. Blue Zone served that really well. And then you can keep running through those, and we would still provide connective tissue like better gear and character levels. And if that game was successful, then we could build upon it because it already has the client server architecture to be an MMO. We could keep building. We look at Warframe as a great example of a game that did kind of start small and added on to it to something that very much, I would call it an MMO today.
Yeah, I was going to ask you. It reminds me of the Guild Wars method, right? Original Guild Wars was a little bit more of a lobby group of people run out, do a bunch of questing, come back to the lobby, and then later they're like, all right, we did well. We have a full blown MMO in mind, and Guild Wars 2, by all accounts, still hopping, doing fine, getting expansions and content and everything. Like what you're saying is exciting to me because I think that path is, people can see it. If you had to give, but that also takes a bunch of investment, right? You're not just going to pull this out of your back pocket, but
right. Nobody is writing checks today. So even if you wanted to make a game for like $15 million, it's going to be almost impossible to find someone willing to pay that.
I don't want to be conspiratorial, but I'm going to play this just to preface it. All right. I have this conspiracy that the industry is, you can point to a lot of factors, economic factors and otherwise, why the industry is perhaps holding back on investment on big projects like this. But it seems to be pretty universal across the whole thing. How much of this, I got to bring up the A word, but how much of this is the financial side of the business going, we're waiting for AI and the associated tools around AI and gaming to mature to the point that we need to at least see if this is going to eliminate a ton of jobs and we don't have to hire so many people. So then we can just tell a computer and 2 guys to do this MMO instead of a team of 50. Is there anything to my cockeyed idea about that?
I mean, I'll let the others weigh in too, but the way I think about it is if you're a CEO, particularly of a fairly large publicly traded company, you really have one job, and that is make the stock price go up. Mm-hmm. And there are a couple things that can make the stock price go up. You can have a huge product hit that has a ton of revenue, but the other side of that is you can cut costs. And companies today are generally rewarded for cutting costs by having the stock price go up. Now, they'll have a problem in the future when they don't have any product because they've laid everyone off to make to cut costs. And while I think AI will probably bring a lot of revolutions to the game industry, honestly, it's not happening today. If a CEO is saying we're laying off people because we're backfilling them with AI, I can tell you from the inside, that's just not reality. AI is not yet at the level where it can generate content. It may get there. They may hope it does, but I think that's just a talking point to make the stock price go up.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, I think I think some of what is happening today is there's been a focus for several years now on using more external development. And that was something that our studio had embraced of keep a small core team and then wherever possible, work with external partners, which allows you to keep the project scope tighter, manage cost more responsibly. That's been a big persistent trend for AAA games for several years now. And I think that's pretty real. And then I also think a lot of what's going on is just sort of risk mitigation. And Kristina talked about this too. Places do not want to bet even tens of millions of dollars on something that might have a chance of failing. Mm-hmm. And there's a whole bunch of memes around this, right? Expedition 33 is one of my favorite games of the year. And it's also maddening seeing all of the they made that for $12. And it's well, no, they spent more than $12 to make that game. Yeah. The team seems to have done an amazing job of keeping things small, having a tight scope, a responsible budget. That game is a runaway smash success for a whole bunch of reasons. But it definitely cost more than $12. And it's a little maddening from where I sit, seeing a lot of the conversation around dev budget where it's, people want to spend $300 on a game and have it make hundreds of millions of dollars. And maybe sometimes that happens once or twice a year and you read about it and people take the lesson from that of, oh yeah, that's a repeatable thing. instead of looking at, how many tens of thousands of other projects tried that and didn't work. So I think it's mostly about a lack of willingness to take risk right now, given kind of how many high-profile failures and expensive busts there have been.
Kristina, what's your thought on all of that? And is my idea as crazy to you as it is to everybody else?
I don't think your idea is crazy, but I don't think it's the direct explanation for what's going on. I think even a lot of the companies we were talking to, they're all undergoing, we're figuring out our new strategy. So we're not doing any investments right now. Maybe next year. Everybody just seems to be in this on pause mode, waiting for the market to improve, waiting for some magical strategy where you can make a game with 100% success rate of getting $1 billion. So I think everybody is just in a very cautious mode right now. And there's a multitude of reasons. AI is one of them, I think, is let's wait and see what happens with the tools, but it's not a direct influence.
Right. Well, let me roll on from that and say, where is this is how little players know about the financial side of things. We just I don't think we have a good understanding of it. And I don't want to speak for everybody. There's certainly somebody out there who has a better understanding than me, but we see a year like 2025 and we go, man, there's some bangers this year. What a year in video games it's been. You mentioned Expedition 33, but I could tack onto that about 12 other Game of the Year candidates right alongside it. And I feel like we've been on that run since 2022 and forward. These last few years of just every year, amazing stuff, big money being made by somebody, and players are we're eating well in terms of what's available to us. We've also never had so many services available to us, so many choices available to us, platforms, cross-platforms. All of this stuff is at this peak level in a lot of ways. But then I hear behind the scenes all the time, constant news about mass layoffs, entire companies being shuttered, big, huge tech companies who can afford it, instead saying, we're pulling out. We thought games were going to be an overnight success. We're not doing this anymore. The recent Amazon stuff reminds me of that, some Microsoft stuff. So you see this happening from the top down in a year where they're making so much, they're making money hand over fist. Many of those same companies I'm mentioning. So I guess help me make sense of that. Where is that investment actually going? If we're having, it feels like Renaissance and Dark Ages is happening at the same time. And I can't reconcile it. Anyone can address that. I don't know who I'm even aiming at.
Yeah, I mean, as a player, right? I keep a running list of games that I haven't had time to play yet and need to, and that list just gets longer every year. And this year, I have several possible Game of the Year contenders I haven't even been able to try. So I think your point about from being a gamer perspective, it's kind of never been better. I believe that personally. Mm-hmm. I think one of the best arguments for some hope for game development is that publishers and investors at some point will likely look at their portfolio and say, what games are we going to follow up with in 2026, 2027, 2028? And this year's successes were not greenlit or funded in the last 6 to 12 months. Many of them were in dev for 3, 5, or more years. And so my hope is that places that realize that they've perhaps overcorrected and shuttered too much of the portfolio or gone a little bit aggressive in that direction, that at some point they've got to look and say, oh, we really need more games, and that they start making some of those investments again. That for me is maybe one of the cases for some hope for the game dev side of things. But yeah, it is definitely in our jobs where all of us love playing these games and then we're dealing with this mess with our game in our studio. It is a little bit of a jarring split screen for sure.
Yeah. Greg, any thoughts on that? Just kind of where the business is? And maybe you see something on the future that I don't, where it says, oh, it's all going to flip. Unionization will become common. People as a resource will become valuable. You know what I mean? I know that I feel a little Pollyannish about it, but that's what I want for it.
there is a cyclical nature to this. Part of what we're still reacting to is kind of the over exuberance of the COVID era when gaming spiked. And we all kind of knew it at the time that, like, look, it's not that we're making better games at this moment. It's just that people are home playing games. And so all the game companies generated a ton of revenue and turned that around into like hiring more and launching more products. You can look at interest rates are not great right now, so it's harder to borrow. There's a lot of global destabilization. There's concern that tech salaries in the US and Europe have gotten so much higher than in Eastern Europe and Asia, LATAM, that you're better off trying to fund a team in those places. There's just a confluence. If we had been in this situation like 4 years ago, I am confident we would have been getting multiple offers. That's just a fact. That's the situation that studios were in. And that may be the case if we were 3 years from now and we just happened to catch this at a lull when people weren't spending money.
Well, it brings us to a good question in the chat. Thomas in the chat says, I have a question. Team-wise, is the plan to stay together moving forward, or will people, whoops, it skipped up there. Will people all branch off again into other projects? I mean, some of this you may not even be able to talk about, but obviously you love who you work with and you'd love to have that team all working together. But any of that you can talk about at this stage?
I mean, the thing we would love to do is make our game. We fall in love with that game. Players love it. We think it's a good game. Failing that, we would love to keep the team together as much as we can, because in addition to making Ghost the product, we also have just made a great culture, and we're very low drama. The people love working together. And so we'd love to keep as much of the team intact. But that would, again, mean finding a publisher out there that had a game they wanted to do and was willing to hire us. We do have a senior team, which means we have people with, kids in college or mortgages or car payments. Like, they can't just go without a salary for very long. So probably what will happen is if we don't get a major investment, we will start to lose people. And we already are to some extent as people find jobs. No hard feelings. We encourage them to do that. If we have enough of the team together at a moment when we get investment, then we'll see what we can do. Otherwise, it may be reality that we just scatter to the four winds, as much as I hate to say that.
Yeah. And of you mentioned that you don't own the IP. I mean, what you've done has been bought and paid for. Can some concepts move forward? Like the Blue Zone idea still feels really unique in the business. And I rue the day when I hear about some game calling their thing, I don't know, purple zones, and then doing what you described, and all this transparency turned out to just be a thing someone else could just lift and use. How much of that can you take forward conceptually and work on new projects, or, if all this works out the way you want?
I mean, technically, NetEase owns all of those ideas. Now, the way video games get made is you base it on what came before. Like, we have experience points in our game. We certainly did not invent experience points. That's just kind of a common trope at this point. If we got someone who was like serious, then we would have a conversation with NetEase about how can we move forward where we have blue zones or something similar to that. If that doesn't happen, there are still a lot of games that are going to explore how do you get content reuse? How do you procedurally generate or algorithmically generate, or even with AI, how do you make lots and lots of levels for players to consume? So I think there are path forwards there. Just kind of the details matter. So
yeah, famously, someone brought it up in the chat. They hope it doesn't turn out like the Nemesis system and nobody can iterate on it. Yeah, I would hope not. But that's how, Microsoft once famously patented the right mouse click or left mouse click or something like that, which is a very weird thing to patent. And that didn't last very long.
A lot of that happens because patent trolling has become so prolific, particularly in the US. Maybe it happens in other places, where someone will say, hey, you stole my idea, now you owe me money, and they drag you through court. So a lot of times tech companies do this defensively, where they're not really planning on going after anyone. They just want to be able to make the claim that, look, no, we do own this. We have a patent on it. We're not stealing your idea. Things like, while I don't love the way the Nemesis system turned out, like, that was a successful game that launched and had a proven thing. Like, while I love the idea of blue zones, you can't point to a product that has made millions and millions of dollars because of Blue Zone. So, there's just less need to defend that, I think.
Is there anything any of you can think of that, I mean, this is such 2020 hindsight stuff, and maybe there's nothing, but is there anything you'd do differently if you went back to the beginning of the process? That's a hard one. Any of you can do it. I'll just throw that carrot out there, and one of you can bite down hard. John, you look like you want to answer that. What do you think?
Yeah, I've been thinking about this a lot. Oh, hold on. There we go. I think I just fixed my audio. Yeah, I think it's really easy to second guess a whole bunch of decisions, right? But like at the highest level, knowing everything that I do right now, like would I have still taken the leap of faith and tried to do this with Greg and everyone? Like, yeah, absolutely. And I actually, when I was first considering FPC and was talking to my wife and friends about it, like I am people who know me know this, like I'm a deeply pessimistic person. So, I sort of joked with them, but I meant it. I was like, the most likely outcome here is failure, because most startups fail, most games fail. That's just the reality of it. And what I would say though is I would take our odds over other people in the same situation. Like I thought the game idea was great. The team that we built was awesome. I think the thing that's sort of frustrating to me from in hindsight is that I had sort of assumed that the most likely reason we would fail would be because our game wasn't good, or that idea that we had of Blue Zones, like we tried really hard at it for a year or two and it didn't work. And in some ways, I feel like we did the hard part. Like we managed to create a really cool innovation that I think would have anchored an awesome MMO. And then we're in this situation regardless. So that's frustrating. But like, would I have made any major decisions differently? Honestly, not really. There's a whole bunch of small stuff that, hey, last week I did this thing and I wish I could have changed that. But like taking the big swing that we did, I'm glad for the experience still.
Kristina, how you feel about your time?
I mean, John put it very well, and I echo his sentiment of, I would say it's more than frustrating. It's heartbreaking to see games are really hard to make. Games are really hard to make because there's a lot of disciplines, especially when you're innovating on technology. There's a lot of like learnings. Then you have to make it fun and make it creative. And it is blending science and art together in a way that is mystical and magical. And I think when you get the hard parts working, you've got a team, they gel well together, they work well together, not perfectly, that's humans. You've got a game that is fun. It's not perfect, but like you have time to get it even better, right? And to see it kind of cut at the knees is very hard. And I think this also isn't, the first time this has happened in the games industry. I think this is a pattern. And it's really sad because if you have a really strong team, they're going to make good products, but you've got to give them space and time and safety. And that's something that the industry, I think, lacks. And hopefully we can find it again.
Yeah, let's hope it improves. What I hope for the future of all of this is that, we'll hear some good news about something out of you, and whether it's people with you that are doing something cool individually, or if there's a way to extend it out and you've got a smaller team, or even the same team working on something new, or suddenly somebody comes through with the investment you need. I mean, those are all things that I really hope for. I know that this could not have been easy, Greg, on you personally. And as someone who is interested in what you're doing as both an outsider and a friend, I can't imagine this was easy as studio head to A, convey the news at all, and B, have to deal with, the aftermath of all of this and sort of just figuring out what to do. I hope the best, and I hope whatever that is all of us one day later on going, man, remember that time? That was pretty cool. But isn't it great they made this thing and we're all playing it and having a good time and all of that stuff. Is there anything you'd love to tell the players before we close it out today?
One of our founding principles was we wanted to be open and transparent. And I wanted to do that with our team internally as well as with players. I have gotten a lot of compliments on LinkedIn, particularly from people saying, thank you for being so open about what this looks like, about, the battle for funding and how you could wind things down gracefully. And likewise, we tried to arm the studio with information every step of the way so that no one was surprised. Like, it would have been one thing if everyone had been working and then one day we're like, hey, guess what, guys, we're closing it all down. But we let the team know kind of how things were going. I'm joking about it a little bit now, but it has been hard. Like, I have had time to grieve over potentially losing this wonderful thing that I'm so excited about and invested so much in. I compare it. I mean, these are all kind of grisly examples, but like when you're the captain of the ship and the ship goes down, you can't just say, well, it's not my fault. I mean, it may not have been any one decision you made, but it's still your job to like get people to safety and take responsibility. And at the end of the day, I was the one piloting the ship. So I have to face that, even again, if it's not like, well, I didn't see the iceberg or whatever.
Mm. Well, as a not existential, that's not the right word. As a connected piece of the FPC family, I feel for you guys, and also weirdly optimistic, just knowing the raw talent and culture you had going there, that there's just going to be good things that come out of it, whether individually or collectively. And I look forward to, there'll be a day where we get back on the mic and we talk about how stuff's going. It'd be awesome if it was somebody swooping in going, I'm a billionaire and I'm bored and I love video games, so here's all the money you'll ever need. That'd be awesome, right?
Scott, do you have any of those people who watch your podcast?
I don't know. I've got doctors, lawyers, and a few other professionals, but I don't know if I have anybody who's just made of money. If I did, or if they are, and you hear this, big opportunity popping with FBC. But I wish you all nothing but the best, obviously. Been nothing but a pleasure working with you guys on this for 20 episodes. And I do look forward. It's weird. It doesn't feel like the end of me. It feels like there's just something else coming. So we'll see what that thing is as we get closer to it. I want to thank the audience, too, for being willing to come in, to ask the questions, to listen to the show, to experience this kind of transparent method of developing a game. It's really unheard of. I still don't see anyone else doing it, and I think it's kind of a special thing. So I'm really proud of this time we've had together, and look forward to whatever the future may hold. So thank you all again for listening, for submitting your stuff, and thank you guys, John, Kristina, Greg, for being here today. I really appreciate it, you guys. Thanks, everybody else, for listening. And if you got any questions, any follow-ups or anything, I'd be happy to pass those on. So keep that stuff coming. You can find more at frogpants.com/street. And for as long, hopefully forever, that it's up, you can go to fantasticpixelcastle.com as well. That's going to do it for us today. Thank you all for listening, and we'll see you next time.